Well, hello and welcome. And this is When Lupus Strikes, Caregivers Wear Plaid. This presentation is based around our book, Caregivers Wear Plaid, which we wrote about, well, we started writing it about 4 years ago. And it wasn't until June of this year that we were able to get it published, and we've self-published it on our website. It's absolutely free, and you can download it, and you can see there where to download it right at the bottom of the screen here, which is at caregivers-wear-plaid.org or .com. We've got both of them. So anyway, during this presentation, I'm going to be going through some of the information that's in here. It comes in ebook format only, but here is a printed copy, and you can see how thick it is. It's actually 32 chapters and over 300 pages. And I can tell you, when I started writing this book, I said, you know, I'm probably going to be able to knock this thing out in maybe a couple of weeks. How much is there really to know? But the reality is there's a lot. And as I kept on getting into it, doing some research, doing some surveys with some folks, talking to doctors, as well as my Patty, who's my co-author, we're able to come up with this book. And it's designed to help men clearly understand what their responsibilities are and how they can help their wife as a caregiver and an advocate to them. And we suggest that when you download the book, take the time to go through each chapter and do it together, because what it'll do is open up communications between the two of you, create some greater awareness and understanding, which is really important, and be able to help you guys work together as a team as you go through your journey with lupus. Now, Patty and I have been together for almost 20 years, and I'm going to tell you about our story in a few minutes, but I've been a caregiver to her for over 20 years, and I can tell you that it's escalated over time, and but we'll get into that in a few minutes. One of the key learnings I want to talk to you about is how do you tell people about lupus and what lupus is, because it's so difficult. People don't understand it, they don't see it, they say you don't look sick, so you know what the heck's going on with you. And this is an example of it right here. It's called squigglies, jumbles, and it's all mixed up. And actually what it is springs from a chair that we had refabricated, and the springs weren't doing all that well. So when the guy came in, he says, I'm going to replace them for you. Well, what do you do with old springs? And Patty said, you know what? Let's put this up on the wall. And as you saw the initial placard coming in, we've got two posters up there also on lupus. And that's what lupus is. It's a disease that is just jumbled with fatigue and joint aches and other circumstances that go along with it. Nobody can make rhyme or reason out of it. And what it allows us to do is open up that conversation with people who come into our home who don't know that we have lupus or that Patty has lupus, and what our relationship is to that. And so it's an easy way to do that. So find your way to bring the subject up, because it's important. If you want people to support you, if you want people to understand the circumstances that your wife is going through, you don't want to hide this in a closet, if you will. And I've seen people try and do that. A quick example of that is a person I know whose wife was, they had just both retired, and his wife wanted to get some elective surgery. And unfortunately, the elective surgery did not go well. And consequently, through her recovery, she lost most of the use of one of her legs, and now she has to walk around with a cane. And she also lost almost her total ability to speak, which obviously is not good. And he was bent on the fact that he didn't want anybody to know. He was embarrassed. And so his whole thing was, we're going to go and we're going to shut her in the house. And that's just not a right thing to do. It's not a smart thing to do. So at any rate, I'm going to talk about a lot of different things here in the next 40 minutes. Probably one of the most important things is energy passes, or at least what I call an energy pass. What is it? Well, you as a guy probably have seen that your wife has been fatigued and this only has so much energy, and this has probably evolved over time to when it's getting worse and worse and worse, and you know the standard operating comments are, you don't look sick, you're gold bricking here, why are you always so tired, we don't understand this. And so I came up with the concept of energy passes so people could understand why it is so difficult living with lupus to have the necessary energy that you need to be able to do the things that the things that your wife wants to do. And so this will help you understand it a little bit. Your wife will get 1 energy pass, maybe 2 energy passes, maybe 5 energy passes or more on a daily basis. And what occurs during that period of time is she uses them up. And once she's used them up, she's totally fatigued for the day, wiped out for the day, very difficult for her to do things, especially if she has joint pain along with her fatigue and other issues such as asthma. Interestingly enough, with lupus, one disease begets another, and that's one of the things as a caregiver to your wife, that special person to your wife, is going to come to learn. This is just the beginning, as they say, and it'll continue to not necessarily get worse. People do go into remission, which is great, and we certainly hope that your loved one does, but in case they don't be surprised if there are other diagnoses that come along the way with lupus. So anyway, back to energy passes. 1 energy pass could be just getting out of bed and getting dressed. That uses up an energy pass. So if your wife only has 1 energy pass for that day, and you can't buy them, it's God-given. Somehow this just happens to women with lupus, that they either wake up feeling great that day, or they wake up and it's, my God, what's happened? And maybe they get 2 energy passes for the day. And if they take a shower, that can take that one away. A phone call conversation with a friend can use up another energy pass. Going to the store might take up 2 or 3 energy passes. And why your wife or significant other will better organize themselves, that when they're going out, they will make sure that they go from one place to another place to another place versus making 3 separate trips, just making that 1 trip. So those are what energy passes are all about. From a caregiver standpoint, creating stress actually uses up a energy pass. So you want to be able to reduce the stress as much as possible in your household. And frankly, guys, that's not easy. And I understand that, especially if there are circumstances going on in your relationship. But I can guarantee you that by going through this book together, Caregivers Wear Plaid, you're going to have a better understanding of what's going on with her lupus, better understanding how to become that caregiver and advocate to your wife, your significant other, and most importantly, better communications and respect for each other of what's going on. And that, frankly, is what are the foundation of a good relationship. Okay, how do we get involved with this whole thing, or how did I get involved with it? Patty and I were first loves in 4th grade. I can remember the day she walked through the door. I just fell madly in love with her, and I was only 9 years old, so what the heck's going on there? But you can see she's a pretty lady. And as you can see, I'm wearing plaid, which I am today. Who knew back then that plaid would become my signature? And so we fell in love. We went to dancing school together, as 9-year-olds, can fall in love and do those kind of things. And we had a wonderful relationship until I moved away. And of course, it's puppy love. I mean, that's the way things are. And we moved to the next town above. And when it came time to go to high school, our town didn't have a high school, and we went to the high school that I had actually moved from, which is in Westport, Connecticut. And lo and behold, who's there but Patty. And our relationship started again, and we dated for a couple of years, and God only knows what happened, but we separated, and honestly, neither of us can remember why. But we went on with our lives, went to school, and got married, had children, separately, separate relationships. And 40 years later, Patty contacted me on classmates.com And as things were, she was going through a divorce, and I was also going through a divorce. So we decided, let's go from the frying pan into the fire, and see if we can make this work. Because God only knows she was my first love, and there was a bond there. There was remembrances of people and circumstances in our youth that were kind of important to us. So at any rate, we're doing great. 20 years later, here we are. But I can remember Patty telling me about she had lupus, and by that time I really didn't care, though I didn't really understand. And but she kept on talking to me about it. And she was down in Mobile, Alabama. I was here in Charlotte, North Carolina, working for Bank of America. And finally she came up, and we got an apartment. And it was kind of interesting because I would check in on her during the day, just how are you doing, this kind of thing. And when I got home, she was full of life, everything was fine, great energy. And what I didn't realize was that all day long she was resting and not using up her energy passes, if you will, so that she could make dinner and be that, housewife that, any woman wants that husband to be. That might sound a little sexist, and I don't mean it that way. But we come from that era, if you will, because we're both in our late 70s now. And but over time, I began to realize how fatigued that she was really becoming. So, 40 years, lupus. Patty decided to get involved when she came here to Charlotte with the Lupus Foundation of America, and she became a board member, ultimately secretary to the board, and she was chairman of the board of the foundation, and I think that was 2007 to 2009. And that was at a time that we found Christine John Fuller, who many of you probably know, who came on as our president and CEO, and started taking the chapter from the Piedmont chapter up to the North Carolina chapter with the merger with the Winston-Salem chapter. And so several years later, after Patty dropped off and Christine was there, Christine asked if I would be willing to come onto the board. And I said yes. Now, one of the things I've been able to do is produce a lot of videos for the Lupus Foundation through our workshops and our summits, and they're all up on the Lupus Foundation of America North Carolina chapter website, so you can go and check those out, because there's a lot of good information out there. And unfortunately, most of that information is just as viable today as it was when it was shot 10, 12, 13 years ago. So we still have a long way to finding a cure. At least we have Ben Liston now from GlaxoSmithKline, which is good. So I came onto the board and became board chair ultimately. And that is when I, in my last year on the board, which was in 2016, I had stepped down as board chair in 2015 because you could only serve 2 years in that capacity, and I had 1 year to go on my 6-year commitment to the board. And so I took Christine to lunch, and for some reason I said to her, I think I'm going to write a book. And she said, about what? And I said, Caregivers for Men. And she says, what's the title going to be? And I said, caregivers wear plaid. And I think I explained to you earlier what that looks like and how I came up with plaid. And I thought I could knock this thing out in a couple of weeks, but it took 4 years. And finally got it done. And now it's out there and it's absolutely free, and the reason it is we wanted to get it to as many people as possible who can benefit by it. So we've had good reviews, and our hope is that you'll download it, not only because of this presentation, and also that you will share it with other people that you know who have lupus or other disabling autoimmune diseases that can benefit by our book. Okay, here's another key point for you to know, and that is that you are a caregiver and you are an advocate. And that is exceedingly important, Because if you don't know what's going on with your wife, it's very difficult for you to help her. Yeah, you can call her and on the way home from work and say, honey, what can I pick up for you? She might be coming home from work herself and just calls you and says, could you stop and get something because I'm tired? Well, that's being a caregiver. That's helping out. And that's the concept of being a caregiver, is being able to do those little things on the way home, around the house, transportation, whatever it might be. There's another side of this, and it's called advocacy. And advocacy is going to your wife, your significant other's doctor's appointments and being there for her. And I can tell you this means more to Patty than you can imagine. Because the reality is, and I don't know about you, but anytime you go see your doctor, if you got any specific issues that are going on and they want to relate things to you, often you come out of there and can't remember totally what was said. And so the important thing is for you to go as an advocate, sit there and take notes. Now let me go off screen for a second here, because I have a book, which is right here in our kitchen. And in this book, what we do is every time we go to the doctor, I journal it. I write everything down of what's going on with her. And you cannot imagine the number of times, and I mean these are copious notes when they need to be, not only the number of times that Patty says, exactly what did he say or she said, and we have it here, but more importantly, when a doctor says, well, what happened at your last appointment and what did they say? And you know, that gets a little fuzzy, especially with, you know, lupus. Women have what's called brain fog, and that makes it a little difficult for them to remember things that are going on. So getting to her appointments with her doctors, if you can do that, is extremely important. The other thing that we do, and you've probably heard this before, but as a caregiver, I keep her medical list, and we'll throw this up on our site. Actually, it's in the book, so you can find it in the book. But it's her, you know, who she is, all her current medications done in alphabetical order. Because every time she gets to a doctor's office, the nurse takes her in, does her blood pressure, temperature, and says, let's check all your medicines. And lo and behold, most of our doctors are in the same system, but somehow the records are not always accurate. So this speeds them up. It also has any drug reactions that she may have. Her medical history is on the back side of this. And what's important about that, in addition to her, you know, her surgeries, as well as other issues, you know, and Patty's had her issues, to say the least, is that if we find ourselves in the hospital, this puppy comes out real quickly, and the doctors are absolutely amazed and thankful that all this information is in front of them right then and there. So two things, medical list, as well as all the medicines she's on and surgery she's had and other circumstances, such as whether she's on statins, how many other begets that she has, i.e., as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, when someone has lupus, they have the tendency to beget other diseases. And Patty has several of them. So, including she's had pneumonia, she has asthma, and a whole host of things. These are important for the doctor to know. So doing that, also keeping your journal, this is a lifesaver. It really is a lifesaver, because we can go back to doctor and date and indication of what else is going on. You'll also see in the book, and I don't have it with me right now, but we take Patty's temperature, or not her temperature, but her blood pressure on a daily basis, and also her oxygen and her weight. And when we get to the doctor, you know, they always want you to weigh in, but we have a pattern of what's going on, because Patty has issues with her blood pressure that would be important for a doctor to know. So if your wife or significant other are in these situations, these are little ways as a caregiver that you can help document things for your wife. to make it easier when you go to a doctor's appointment. Besides that, you want to take notes on what are you going to bring up at the meeting with the doctor so that you don't forget anything. Because if you're anything like us, we have these brain burps that says, we need to talk to the doctor about this. And of course, when we get to the doctor, what was it that we wanted to talk about? We can't remember. So write down any questions that you might have, and you can put that in the journal also. And one of the things you need to know is that you're a patient too. And if your doctor hasn't said that to you, when you go in as an advocate, know that the doctor's looking at you just as like they're looking at your wife or significant other to see how things are going on with you, because you play a very important role. And one of those keys is how much stress is going on in the household. And I'm not suggesting that you guys can't have arguments and you can't have disagreements on things, because that's only natural. But what I am telling you is, first engage your brain before putting your mouth in gear. We guys have a tendency just to talk and think of what, say what we're thinking versus stopping and thinking about what we're going to say. So again, first engage brain before putting mouth in gear. Now, one of the things you know if you're early on in the stages with lupus is that lupus is not caught. It's not it's not like COVID-19 where you catch the virus. Though oddly enough, a lot of the symptoms in COVID-19 are exactly the same in lupus. I don't know what the connect is there. Doctors and scientists can tell us that, but fatigue, joint pain, shortness of breath if your wife has asthma, a lot of these same symptoms are there. And during this time of COVID, if your wife is getting these, and you just happen to be seeing this video up on YouTube, and just wondering, gee, could this be lupus? But you think it's COVID-19? Well, there's an easy test to check out and see whether it's COVID-19 or not. So go in and get that done. With lupus, it's not. And yet, 1 out of every 123 to 125 women in this country of America, has lupus. Unfortunately, most of them don't know it, and they're at varying degrees of it, and don't get the necessary medical help, or just don't go to the doctor and try and work through it, and don't want people to know what's going on. And consequently, the disease progresses, where if they did get into some treatments, they would be able to manage the disease a lot better. Talking about that and how lupus is managed, in our book we have a whole chapter on medicine and why it's used and what it can do for your wife. So some of it's good and some of it's not good, so one has to be careful. And there's also regimens in there on how you can ensure the fact that you're taking the appropriate medicines at the appropriate time during the day. And as a caregiver, you can help your wife doing that. We'll have other videos around that as we do more for caregivers wear Plaid on our website. And of course, we'll share it with the Lupus Foundation of America's North Carolina chapter so they can put it up on their website also. Now, having said all this, and I'm out of sequence a little bit, but I love this graphic. And here are the donkeys. And as you can see, they've got their own will, and they're not getting together until you get to the bottom of the graphic. And that's what you and your wife have to do. You've got to be able to go in the same direction at the same time as much as you can. Now, one of the things I'm also going to talk about is guilt, because you as a caregiver might start feeling guilty that you're going off and doing things that your wife doesn't have the energy to do. Now, this might just come about because you've gone out to dinner, for example, and this actually happened to us, and it's happened more than one time. We went out to dinner. It was New Year's Eve. We're looking forward to a wonderful evening. We're going to go see the Gaither Vocal Band and all the people that he brings. And the music is just unbelievably good. So good, I had gotten us front row seats to that evening. So we went out to dinner that night. And then the next step is we're going to go down to the Coliseum and go to the concert and really enjoy that evening and celebrate New Year's Eve with a whole bunch of terrific people. So at dinner time, all of a sudden Patty started feeling sick. Her meal wasn't really digesting properly, and something else was going on also. And she looked at me and she said, "Sean, I can't eat this and I can't go tonight." Now imagine how I felt. I've sprung for these tickets. I've sprung for dinner, and sometimes this is how a guy thinks. And all of a sudden she can't finish her meal and she can't go to this. But rather than reacting that way, I was more concerned about Patty, because she's the most important thing in my life right now, and has been for 20 years, as well as my other children and family. But I'm her caregiver, and so I got her home, and it was too late to call anybody to say, "Hey, do you want tickets?" And we, watched New Year's Eve unfold on TV, and frankly, she got into bed. So those are the kind of things that you potentially can run into, where your wife just can't do something. And the important thing is communicate, communicate, communicate. There's nothing more important than that. And so here's another key, guys. If you're having trouble communicating with your wife, or she with you, what Patty and I do is we just call time out. We go into the bedroom and sit on the couch or sit on the bed and just say, "Okay, what's bothering you?" And we let it out. So this guilt factor can be really a problem. And I started feeling guilty because I like to go and play golf. I have the time to go do it, though I only play normally once a week, because I still have my own business, and that keeps me pretty busy. But I love the flexibility of being able to go and do that. But what I found was that when I was on the golf course, I kind of felt guilty that Patty was sitting at home in her chair with all her aches and pains and fatigued and everything else, and here I am off having a good time. And that really wasn't fair to her. And it really started eating at me. So I came home one day from golf and I said, "We need to talk." And so we went into the bedroom and sat on the bed, and I said, "I've really got a serious problem." And she said, "What's that?" And I said, "I am feeling so guilty that I'm going off and playing golf, and you're sitting at home, and you can't do that. And I'm out here having fun, and you're not having fun, and so that's not good." And Patty just looked at me and she says, "No, I'm glad you can go do that, because you've got to reduce stress. And that's a great way for you to go and do it and be out there with your buddies," and I completely understand. So since that day, I've gotten a lot better about the guilt factor, and today I don't feel guilty, but it was a transition of coming down to that. And but the important thing is communications, communications, communications. Okay, now what's the biggest thing that you're going to be dealing with your wife as you go through this caregiver advocate journey with your wife and Lupus? And that is something that I learned playing golf. Good segue, since I was just in golf here. And playing golf down in Florida. We were down on vacation, and I brought my golf clubs with me. As it would be, Patty usually slept the morning away to build up her energy passes in hopes that she had energy passes for the day. And I would go off to the local golf course and see if I could hook up with some people and get a round of golf in. And fortunately, I was able to do this on that particular trip. And we're playing a round of golf, and I always like to begin to learn something about the person I'm playing with golf with, possibly their family and what have you. And it came up the fact that why we're down there, we're visiting, and it's kind of a little difficult. My wife has lupus, and so she doesn't have all the energy we like to have, but we're looking to go to dinner tonight, yada, 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 yada. And the guy says, "You know what? My wife has lupus too." I said, "You're kidding me." He said, "No." And he said, "My God, we went through all kinds of gyrations to find out. I mean, doctor after doctor and tests and everything else, and it probably took 4 to 5 years to know that she had lupus," which actually is the same case with Patty. I can reflect back now with Patty and realized that when we were in high school, Patty had lupus. She had it then, but she wasn't diagnosed until she was 26. And so she's actually had it for over 50 years today. And so this gentleman I was talking to, who I was playing golf with, his wife had lupus also. And I said, what's the most difficult thing for you living with your wife and being that caregiver advocate? And he said the most astounding thing that has stuck with me, it's in the book. In fact, there is a chapter on it, and it's 4 words, and that is living within her limitations. And that is something you need to understand as a caregiver, that you're always going to be living within your wife, your significant other's limitations. And that's okay. That's really not a problem as long as you make the choice to adjust, and adjust as her disease is progressing or hopefully not progressing. So let's get into that right now, of what that looks like, living within her limitations. This is chapter 2 in our book, Caregivers Wear Plaid, and it's living within her limitations. And it really got to me when he said this to me at the golf course. It really made me started thinking that that's exactly what's going on. And when I mentioned it to Patty, she says, my God, she said, that explains it exactly, of what's going on in our relationship, and what my responsibilities are to her, and how I have to interact with her. So the key thing, or the first thing you need to think about, is you got to think about her before you think about you. And that's not always easy for guys to do, especially if you're macho and, like to get out and play cards and do the beer thing at the the pub and that kind of stuff. It's not always easy for her and you to go together, and you want to be home for her and just not leaving her by herself. So this is an adjustment in your life, whether you realize it or not, that you got to think about her before you think about yourself. Okay, insight number 2, compromise before the war. It takes 2 people to fight, and oddly enough, compromise is a very easy thing to do. Insight number 3, at living within our limitations, is seek to learn everything that you can and understand what you can about the disease that she's living with. Now, we mentioned this before, you don't have to worry about catching it. We had a friend that, I remember we were over at their house, and his wife was very sick, and they had 1 child at the time. And we were doing a barbecue, and there were several other people there with lupus, and God, it was a hot day. And we went outside, and he was cooking, and I went outside to be with him. And so we sat down and we're talking, and he just looked at me and he said, if my wife hadn't gotten that damn sunburn, we wouldn't be dealing with this. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, it's the sunburn that gave her the lupus. And I said, that's not true. The sunburn not created, but brought the lupus out in her body. That recessive gene, that protein, all of a sudden tripped that button. And the way I normally like to explain it is, I have gout. And lupus is like a light bulb in your system, and it's not on. And gout is like a light bulb in your system, and it's not on. And something's going to trigger it. And in my case, I'm not exactly sure what it was. It could have been drinking too much alcohol, for all I know. But at any rate, bam, it went, and I had a big foot problem. And I've really had problems dealing with it over the years, though fortunately it's under control today in this late age, and that doesn't normally happen. But the same with lupus. There's certain things that can trigger lupus, and certainly getting out in the sun is one of the things that can do it. And one of the reasons, frankly, that your wife or your significant other, I keep on saying that, but I mean your loved one, should not be going out in the sun, especially between the hours of 10 and 4 in the afternoon, because they can create a flare. And so here's this friend, this person we're sitting outside, and he had no clue. Can you imagine the anger that was built up inside of him? And I'm going to tell you something, that marriage was on the rocks. Well, today, they're still together. They have a second child, and they're happy as anyone could be under those circumstances, because he clearly understands his role as the caregiver and how to live within her limitations and respect that in her. So that's insight number 3. Insight number 4, and we talked about this, problems are not solved through guilt. And don't allow these things to build up in you. And the key is, we talked about this, talk out your feelings. That is so important, because she's going to talk to you about how she feels, and her biggest concern is her fears about what's going on in this relationship, her feeling of insecurity, that, my God, is he going to hang around? Is he going to stay? And those are very valid, because if she gets, hopefully not, but if she gets sicker, those insecurities even become more of an issue, not only from a standpoint of your relationship, but also from a standpoint of her life and what she wanted to accomplish in life and the things that she wants to do in her life. And, you know, probably the most important things are family at this juncture, and to be there for them and be that legacy to them. And in a way, that's why we wrote the book also, is to leave a legacy to our children, and especially to other people who are in this situation. So we talked about guilt before. Don't allow that to become a limitation in your relationship. Open it up and discuss it. So let's go to number 5, and that's putting the puzzle back together. And as you can see, here's the puzzle. It's weird. It's crazy. It is what it is. But you got to figure out how to put that in context and make sure that you guys are organized and are dealing with each other in a coherent way. So you need to bring balance into your life. And what I mean by this is not only what your career is and the things that you're doing, and incidentally, if you're working outside of the home and you go to that office every day and your wife is at home, give her a call once or twice a day and just ask how you're doing, honey, and tell her you love her. Women cannot hear that enough. And I don't care who she is, they can't hear that enough. And it might sound a little schmaltzy, but you know what? It's kind of important to do that. I even do that with my brother, and he and I have never gotten along. But he's family, and I love him. And even though we don't always agree, I always tell him I love him, because I do. I mean, that's just the way it is. And that's what you got to do for your wife, is just let her know those little times, and even bring flowers home to her periodically, because most women love flowers also. So you got to balance your life from that standpoint. And there are little things that you can do if you're going out to a party, for example. And there are times that we can't go to a party and we just have to call and say we can't make it. And that's why it's important to be able to have that conversation with friends, neighbors, and relatives of what Lupus is all about, because you might accept to go someplace for dinner, and then you just can't do it because she can't do it. She just doesn't have the energy passes for that day to be able to get dressed, put her makeup on, which is another energy pass, and get in the car, which just getting to the car could be an energy pass, and getting to the party. So when we do get to the party, and we have a good time, we're usually the first ones there, so it's not a big problem of getting in, and we can spend some time with the host and hostess. And then we have a sign that we use, which is very simple, you know, little thing to the nose, which means she's ready to go home. And I might not be, but that's our balance. And that's my understanding. It's time to get her out of there, because if I don't, she's going to get worn out even more so, and that's not good for her health. She'll start getting stressed over that, because she doesn't want people to see her as somebody who's sick. And there's no woman around that does want other people to see how sick they might be. And frankly, in a way, that's a benefit for people who have lupus, is they don't look sick. That they can go out in public and be with people and look absolutely normal. But trust me, when they get home, and you know this as well as I do, a whole different face comes on. And you need to respect that and understand the balance that needs to be there in allowing her to be able to relax and do the things she needs to be able to do to have that quality of life, the best quality of life that she can have. And of course, you too. Okay, let's go to number 7. Manage what you can. You can't be all things to all people. It's difficult to do that. And she can't be all things to all people also. So if you got things to do in a day that need to be done, program to do that. Now, for example, I've spent most of today outside taking care of the lawn, doing some other things around the house that needed to be done, getting Patty fed. Not that she couldn't go and do it herself, but we've just gotten into that routine because I know when she gets up to go do it, it's exhausting for her to do so. And but it's managing what needs to be done. And so I'm shooting this presentation tonight while she's in bed, so that I'm not distracted by her and she's not distracted by me. But it's managing the things that you need to get done and the things that she wants to get done. And frankly, if she needs to get things done, be flexible enough to allow her to get the things that she needs to get done with your help, because that goes an awful long way, obviously, in the relationship. Insight number 8, patience is a virtue. And it's tough to maintain under adverse health conditions. It affects everyone. And talk about that frustration, because you're going to have stress, anxiety. And again, I'm going to go back to the doctor. When you're in there with your significant other, your love, as that advocate, trust me, the doctor's looking at you also. How stressed out are you, and what kind of stress are you bringing into this relationship that can be aggravating her health circumstances? What can help you as a caregiver is being able to get out and talk with somebody else in reference to what's going on in your life and how difficult this is. And I can tell you there's nobody better than somebody else who's a caregiver too, to somebody who's living with lupus. And we have those friends that have become our friends, terrific people. But we understand what they're going through and they understand what we're going through. And we try and help each other either by taking meals over or a bottle of wine or something to brighten their day. But from time to time I'll go out to lunch with one of my friends and listen to him, because he's got more problems than I have. Listen, after all, I wrote the book. Theoretically, I should know all this stuff, but I'm human too, and stress can get to all of us. Anxiety can get to all of us. So it's good to talk these things out, and if that doesn't work, go find a body of water or a beach or someplace like that and scream your lungs out and get that stress out. Anything to do that. Go exercise, go for a walk, go jogging, go bicycle riding, whatever floats your boat. But I'll tell you what's really important also is seeing people and your wife seeing people. During COVID-19, because we've all been stuck here, we've been having driveway parties, and we're social distancing, and we have people come over to our driveway in the neighborhood, and I cook up some hamburgers and hot dogs, and we'll do some beans, and people will bring a dish from this house and a dish from that house. We usually get 8 to 10 people, and it's a nice evening, and it just buffers that whole we're stuck in the house and what's going on, so it makes life a little bit easier. So think about doing that, because I think COVID-19 is going to be going on for a while, at least until the beginning of the new year. Okay, let's go to the next one. I'm going to tell you something. There is a higher being, and you need to put your faith in that being, whomever it might be for you, depending on your religion and what your beliefs are. But it's amazing how Patty and I communicate, and it's amazing how you can help her. And there's some areas I've been able to do that through auto-suggestion, as well as using Reiki and some other techniques that I've learned over the years. But that's not something we're going to get into in this presentation, because I'm probably getting pretty close to running past my time here. So I'm going to wrap this up with 2 others. Always tell her you love her. That's probably the most important thing that you can do amongst everything else. She needs to know that she is loved, that she's cared for. Do not allow her to become insecure in her surroundings. That is really dangerous to your relationship. And finally, and this might sound simple, but living within her limitations, allow daily life to be as normal as it can be. One of the chapters in our book is on choices. And what will happen is through your choices, you will adjust to a new normal. And that's what this is all about as a caregiver, is taking on this new normal. So I'm going to roll the titles of the chapters here as we go into the end so that you get an idea of what is going on in this book. But let me just get to the chapters here, and we can wrap up this way. And know you can go to our website to download the book free. And again, it's absolutely free. There's no charge for it. It's ebook only. Maybe one day we'll have it printed. Possibly I'll do an audio book around this and charge for it. But we want to make sure this gets out to everybody that it possibly can get out to, and help them. I mean, that's the bottom line to it. But in the book, we talk about the power of choice, living within our limitations, which we just went through. An interesting chapter called A Baker's Dozen. I think you'll really enjoy it. The privacy of pain. And that is one of the things and one of the reasons why I tell you that you need to get out. You need to let people know what's going on with your wife, with her approval now. You just don't go out and tell everybody what's going on. She has to approve about this, but she and you need to talk to people about what's going on. People, make them know that this is not something that they can catch. It's just something that you have to deal with. Because if you don't, all of a sudden they will all of a sudden shrink into their house and never come out. And that's the privacy of pain. And there's a lot of pain associated with lupus, as you well know. We talk about the elephant in the room, and that, frankly, is divorce, and why you need to talk through this and get educated, because all the information you need is in this book, trust me. In reference to that, we talk about the evolution of a caregiver and what that looks like. And right now, you're either a novice or you're evolving up to an expert. But there are various stages of becoming a caregiver. It just doesn't happen overnight. It's things that you have to adjust to and continue to remember to do over time. And it becomes easier and easier that way. We also talk about what about you? What about your wife? The fact that we talked about this, you're a patient too. How to explain lupus to others, and we certainly did that with our wall diagram, but we give you some other ideas in the book on how you can explain lupus to other people. And using the energy passes as an example is an easy way to do that. My wife only gets so many energy passes on a given day. God only knows where they come from and why she has more one day than she does another. But it's important to know that she's at least getting them and she can do things. And that's the problem with lupus, is that she only has so much energy, and she needs to parcel it out as best as she can on a daily basis. We also talk about the 5 stages of acceptance, which is the 5 stages of denial. But getting to acceptance is a real key for your wife to get to. And getting to acceptance of what's going on is a real key for you too. So you'll see what those stages are in the book. The second section in the book is the autoimmune conundrum. And we talk about there what triggers lupus, the cycle of lupus, which is kind of interesting. I said to my rheumatologist, have you ever heard of the cycle of lupus? And she said, no. And I said, well, I invented it. So, and you can do that, by the way. Just because there are doctors and scientists out there, I invented the cycle of lupus so you'd have a better understanding, and others would have a better understanding of what it looks like. There's a whole chapter on Till Death Do Us Part and how to handle that, and there are a lot of things that you need to know. Dealing with the medical community and how you do that. And trust me, our understanding of how to deal with the medical community has made a very, very, very big difference in the level of service that we have received from our doctors. The referral process and how to find other doctors that you need. And we even go in and talking about firing a doctor if you need to. But we caution you on that, because if you've been with a doctor for a good period of time, it takes time for them to get up to speed with what's actually going on with your wife. And so if you keep on switching doctors, you're probably going to spend most of your time with them just getting up to speed versus getting good medical advice. There's a whole chapter on whether your child has lupus or not and how to deal with that. and what's the outlook on lupus. And in the final section, it's on strategies. We talk about counteracting fatigue, and this is, things for your wife. The power of support groups. And, a lot of women don't want to go to support groups because they think they're bitch sessions, but I'm going to tell you they're not. And if they are, don't let them be. You can build wonderful relationships there, have a wonderful support group of people. We go out to lunch with them. We're doing now online support group meetings, and we learn a lot about lupus that we might not have learned through our facilitator, who's a volunteer, and we encourage you to participate in that also. The sepsis concern, and this is a very, very big concern. If you're taking your wife to the hospital, you need to read this chapter, and I'm frankly running out of time here in order to do that. How to deal with family, friends, and neighbors. We talked a little bit about that. We also talked about medicines. Your pharmacist loves you, and you need to know how to deal with your pharmacist. That's absolutely key. We talked about not feeling guilty. How to deal with the holidays and special events, and we talked a little bit about that. How to deal with depression, handling stress, lupus, sex, and pregnancy. Yes, guys, you can still have sex with your wife. Of course, that is if she's got enough energy passes to do so and wants to. And you can also have kids, but make sure you talk to your doctor first. And that's the book. Over 300 pages, 32 chapters. We hope you download it. We hope you enjoy it. Now, finally, the Lupus Foundation of America North Carolina chapter is going through some very unique times. And our fundraising efforts are at an all-time low. And it costs to run an operation like this. With no money, there's no mission. And we're doing everything we can to raise money to support our staff and support the programs and services that people living with lupus can take advantage of here in the state of North Carolina. And there are over 50,000 people in the state of North Carolina right now living with lupus that need these services, need that hand to touch them, to help them, to guide them. So I hope that when you go to our website and download our free book, ignore the donation tab on our page, but go to the Lupus Foundation of America's North Carolina chapter's website. It's right down below, as you can see it, and make a donation, whether it's $5 or $10 or $15. If 50,000 people donated $10, we'd have enough money to be able to carry us through the next year. So please do that. Please share this video with your friends, neighbors, and relatives for information standpoint. And if you know people that have lupus, please share it with them also and share our website. Thank you for listening to all this. I know it's a little bit long. I've enjoyed doing this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed listening to it. And we wish you all the best of luck, and stay in touch with us. And God bless.